Yes, thank you everyone. Thank you for coming to my presentation, my awards ceremony. As you can see, we are at a real awards ceremony. This isn't a green screen because there's any sort of remodeling or renovations being done. Nah, not at all. We are at the real Pekachow's Game Awards 2022. This is not fabricated, this is not fake, and it will 100% be better than the actual Game Awards this year. I'll be giving games silly little awards and talking about them. I'm your host, Pekachow. I know. Crazy, hard to believe that I'm your host, but I say let's get into this. Let's quit stalling, get right into it. Our Consumed My Life award goes to Pokemon Violet. So, to start off, let's get the Iron Treads out of the room, please. Great Tusk curb stomps Iron Treads, and I'm a Violet guy, even I think that. But back on topic, the games are not exactly technically sound. There's some freezing, a lot of lag, plenty of pop-in. It's a very rushed product, and it shows. This stuff is constant throughout the game, but honestly, I wouldn't exactly say it's horrible. It's just surprisingly staggering in number for a game to come from the largest media franchise in the world. Now, don't get it wrong, just because these problems don't bother me as much as, like, everyone else on the planet doesn't mean I'm just gonna sit here and defend them, because honestly, I'm not. This just shows Pokemon needs a 4-year generation gap again, or some delays going on, because clearly we can't just have games releasing like this regularly. Hopefully this can be used as a learning experience for whoever's exactly pushing these games to come out so quickly, because it's kind of a problem. Hopefully we can get more gaps or delays or just more people working at Game Freak, because really they're not that large of a team. It really does suck that the game is full of so many technical issues and all that other stuff that's really just turning people off, because really what's there is really good, all technical issues aside. Sure, there's some things I don't like gyms being glorified office buildings now, along with towns being really empty and having most of their doors all locked, as well as the removal of some quality of life features, which is kind of strange, but really there's more good to these games than bad, I feel. This time you're given a large, open region to explore, and you got a lot of objectives to do, lots of things to see. There's 3 whole different storylines, and the story is actually really damn good, especially for main series Pokemon standards. The game is full of wonderful characters, some of the best in the franchise I might even dare to say, and there's plenty of nice emotional beats and twists and all that good stuff in this story. It really caught me off guard to see a main series Pokemon story amount to more than just become champion, defeat bad guy. I'm not saying all previous main series stories follow this to a T, and I mean I haven't really played the games with the apparently best story in the franchise. But before Scarlet and Violet, I'd probably say Sun and Moon had the best story, not Ultra, just normal vanilla Sun and Moon. And honestly, I prefer Scarlet and Violet, so when I inevitably get around to playing Gen 5, then we'll see who really has the best story, but Scarlet and Violet has it for me right now. There is a lack of post-game content here, definitely. Hopefully the DLC will be able to turn that around along with fixed technical issues and add Lopunny, because that is like the one thing keeping this out of the upper echelon of Pokemon games. Where the hell is my Lopunny? But the reason why these games have quickly become my most played games this year is because, well, there's just a lot to do in the open world. Complete the Pokédex, shiny hunt, make competitive teams, all that good stuff. We also got some friends who also play the game, and we do a lot of battles and raids and all that stuff, you know? It's just a lot of fun, and it gives me more of a reason to play the game. No matter what, Pokemon games only seem to be some of my most played games on any given console due to the fact that even with the most bare-bones post-game, there's still plenty to do, and Pokemon Violet is no exception. Our Pleasant Surprise Award goes to Sonic Frontiers. Look, I love Sonic. I really love Sonic, but I'm not gonna pretend like the guy didn't have it rough in the 2010s. The decade started off with strong games, despite the lame stories and writing, but as time went on, the games slowly got worse and worse, and so did the stories and writing. Sonic Frontiers came 5 years after Sonic Forces, so obviously I had a reason to worry. Forces, some people say it's a mid-game, but honestly, Forces is just kind of a trash fire in my opinion. Its horrible writing is second only to Lost World in terms of suckiness, and the gameplay is just so dumbed down and easy and brainless, and the level design is just hallways, and when it's not, it's controlling classic Sonic in these horribly controlling 2D sections, and it's just so bad, and the music, Admittedly, I do think there's a few good things about the game, like the avatar customization, even if the avatar stages were just not it, and the music sucked ass too. As a matter of fact, I think the game actually had a weak soundtrack compared to most other Sonic games, but It's a Sonic game. It's still pretty good at the end of the day, even if I do not like any of the Avatar or classic songs. Add on the botching of a few ports within the gap between Forces and Frontiers, and obviously my expectations for Frontiers were going to be a little low. Even with all the new trailers and info they released that got me hyped, I tried to keep my expectations a little in check just in case the game decides to be, you know, of the usual Sonic inconsistent quality. Thankfully though, Frontiers actually managed to be a really, really great game. I wouldn't say it's up there as one of the absolute best in the franchise, but I'd say it's probably like a top 20 game. The main draw of Sonic Frontiers is the open zone gameplay, which is basically just plop Sonic in a giant Unreal Engine island and have him run around and do all these obstacle courses for these little memory tokens and, you know, talk with his friends, progress the story, get the Chaos Emeralds, all that good stuff. Sonic controls really good in these open zone parts, and it makes it all just really fun to do, like finding all the collectibles and stuff. I do think that some islands are definitely a little lacking compared to others, but in the end, they're really fun to explore. But however, the thing that makes me go, yeah, Sonic is back, baby, let's go, yeah, is the story of the game. Okay, well, I mean, it kind of is, you know, there's Eldritch, Abomination, God things, and tons of, you know, new things being introduced to the Sonic mythos, you know, just like the Dark Age, which is easy, peak Sonic era for me. But it mainly comes down to the writing and having these characters develop and grow and actually feel like themselves again rather than these parody versions we've been getting for like the last 10 years. Each island has its own unique character dynamic featuring Sonic and one of his friends depending on the island. It will either be Amy, Knuckles, or Tails, and I'm not going to get too deep into spoiler territory here, but Sonic has a sort of emotional heart-to-heart moment with each of them towards the end of the island, and these are some of the best moments in the game. The character interactions are just gold, and they really help flesh out and develop these characters even further. Tails especially, after Forces kinda, you know, went all forces on him. What's easily the best part of the game for me, though, is the Titan boss fights, particularly the first three. I feel like the last one is definitely a little lacking compared to the others. But you're Super Sonic, and you're up against these giant ancient robot bosses, and it's the coolest thing ever. There's a heavy metal blaring in the background, and it is just such the music is just amazing, and there's just so many cool attacks, and every single one of them, my jaw was just absolutely on the floor. This is some of the coolest stuff to ever be put in a Sonic game, period. It all sounds amazing, and it is, but there are some critiques that really do hold the game back for me a little bit. There's only really 3 original islands. The last 2 are literally just Kronos Island, but somewhat different. Scratch that, they're literally just pieces of Kronos Island. You can see that by looking in the files. Honestly, it's sort of a Scarlet and Violet situation where I feel like the game definitely needed more time in the oven. On the topic of Scarlet and Violet, the game also has some pop-in issues, like platforms constantly pop in, and being a platformer open-world game, that's obviously going to be kind of a problem. And then there's Cyberspace, which repeats level layouts from other games, has a bunch of constantly recycled themes, 3 of which being recycled from Generations, bad controls, and music I honestly don't care too much for. One thing I was worried about was Cyberspace being too Forces-esque, and unfortunately it was. This isn't exactly how we're gonna get back to Unleashed quality with these boost stages. Hopefully we can turn that around next time. But the most egregious flaw of all is not being able to fight the Titans again. They were the best part of the game. I want to fight the Titans again. But thankfully, they might give you that chance with the content roadmap updates they're going to be doing at some point in 2023. So yeah, that's something to look forward to. The game definitely has a bright future. And honestly, Frontiers left a really positive impression on me. And I would say the future is definitely looking bright for the Sonic franchise as a whole. I'm really excited to see where the franchise goes in 2023 because it's looking to be a big year. Frontiers honestly restored the hope and faith I had in the Sonic franchise by being a really great game, and it has my respect for that. Our immeasurable disappointment award goes to Kirby's Dream Buffet. Unfortunately, being trapped in a digital realm does not allow Dream Buffet to come out on the stage, but oh, look, it's Kirby's Dream Buffet. Oh, he's here. Kirby's Dream Buffet killed my grandma, okay? Nah, I kid, but the way I talk about the game, it sure does seem like that. Between my somewhat negative review of the game and what I had to say during this Kirby 30th anniversary discussion with some fellow Kerbros, which you guys should definitely check out. I got a link in the description, please. That video needs more traction. It's not getting the love it deserves. And now this, I feel like I need to stress, I really don't hate this game. I'm just disappointed. I'm not gonna pretend like I had expectations for Kirby's Dream Buffet to be the new best Kirby spin-off ever, because really, I didn't. It just looks like Kirby Fall Guys, and granted, Kirby Fall Guys sounds very cool, and yes, it is kind of cool, but I'm just really disappointed with how the game just really lacks in content. There is no content besides online, pretty much, and the online is a wasteland. I've said it like a million times, so I should probably not harp forever on this like I did with the last two. Just like what I said in the aforementioned discussion, go check out my review if you want more in-depth thoughts about Dream Buffet, but to keep it brief, the gameplay is honestly really great. The Kirby customization is on point, the aesthetics are amazing, even if I do think it's kinda gross that Kirby is getting his icky, nasty, disgusting germs all over this perfectly good food, and someone might just eat that food at some point in the future, and they're gonna get Kirby's disgusting, nasty germs all over it. And something I didn't mention in my review is actually that I think the music in this game is really good. Original compositions are very strong, there's a lot of awesome reused tracks, which I mean, it doesn't sound like a positive thing, but Kirby music goes hard, man. They're using the good tracks, they're using some pretty good tracks! But it also remixed Block Ball music, which is a massive dub for me and the 2 other Block Ball fans out there. But really, the game falls short when it comes to content. There's really just the online and nothing else, and like I said, the online is a wasteland. I actually played the game recently, and honestly, I had fun. I got addicted and I played for a few rounds, but really, it's kind of a game that's fun in small doses now that the online is basically a wasteland and you're going up against brain-dead CPUs. I feel like I have said like literally all of this before, so I think I'm just gonna cut it short here, but in the end, Kirby's Dream Buffet is not a bad game, not at all. I'm just a little disappointed with how it's lacking in terms of content. Our Did I Play This award goes to Captain Toad Treasure Tracker. This sounds like another really negative award, but it isn't. Not at all. I think Captain Toad Treasure Tracker is actually a great game. It's just when you play so many amazing games in a year, Captain Toad Treasure Tracker, especially being a older release rather than a newer one, kinda doesn't stick out and you don't remember it as much as you do with other ones, you know? The gameplay here is very interesting because it's basically an expansion on the Super Mario 3D World Captain Toad levels where you traverse these obstacle courses, but you can't jump. And here you gotta get stuff like stars and find these 8-bit toads as well for 100% completion. There is a lot of really great things in this game. I like the bosses. They were a really unique and fun way of having bosses without any sort of jumping. All sorts of levels had unique gimmicks, and they were pretty fun to do for the short time they were available. Some of them were ripped from Mario 3D World, which was cool. Nice way to expand on those in a different setting, I'd say. Despite all its greatness, though, I feel like the reason the game sort of fails to stand out among the other games I've played this year and why it's the most memorable one I forgot playing is sort of because, well, besides, you know, what I said before, it's one of those games you kind of get as a gift on a holiday. Like, I got it for Easter. So, I mean, I didn't really pick it or want it, like, super badly, so, I mean, that kind of assists in the game not exactly being the most memorable thing in the world. It was also my second time getting sick in 2022, I believe, out of, like, 5 when I got this game, so, I mean, I wasn't exactly doing too hot. I was kind of out of it. And sometimes the game got a little frustrating. Like, there's this one level that's, like, pitch black, and you gotta find this 8-bit toad. Just thinking about it drains me. Oh man, I was sick and that was just ridiculous. This was literally just a filler award, I'm not even gonna hide it anymore. I wanted to reach 10. 9 awards just doesn't work the same way, you know. But at the end of the day, I kind of forget about it, but Captain Toad Treasure Tracker is a great game, and I would recommend you pick it up if it interests you at all. Our You Didn't Play This award goes to Tamagotchi no Narikiri Channel and Challenge. Okay, so I imagine every single one of you watching is probably going, Pekachow, what the hell is this? What are these games? I have never played this. You're absolutely right about that, but it's a good thing I did, so I can explain it to you. Alright, calm down. Tamagotchi no Narikiri Channel and Tamagotchi no Narikiri Challenge are 2 Japanese DS games, and the only reason I was really able to play these is because I import from Japan like crazy, except I mostly buy merch. One time I decided to mix it up by buying these games, because the DS isn't region locked, so you know, I just decided to pick a game based on something I enjoy. And that unique Japanese thing I enjoy is the Tamagotchi anime series, which, yes, is based on the Japanese virtual pet fad. Despite its dwindling popularity over here in the States, it was definitely a lot more popular in Japan, so much so to the point where, you know, they kind of made an anime series. It's more complex than that. There were some movies before that. You know, I'm not getting into all that. That's not the place to get into it, but it's a really obscure and honestly underrated anime series, and granted, I haven't seen anything past the first season, which is really poorly dubbed, might I add. I did not edit this audio one bit. This is real, and this aired on television. Only the first season and 1 or 2 episodes from the second were actually dubbed in English, and subtitles are non-existent. I have spent hours looking, but I'm just about ready to bite the bullet and watch the series raw, even if I barely understand what they're saying, because, well, really, I just enjoyed it that much. But back on topic to these games, what exactly are these games like? And, well, they're kind of like glorified minigame collections. In Narikiri Channel, you'll take control of Mamechi or Lovelychi, and your goal is to become the top idol on Tamagotchi Planet. How you do this is by completing all these mini-games, which are basically like different shows, and you unlock these by buying different clothing from stores around the town. In order to unlock new mini-games, you need to find like 3 different clothing stores, and you need to buy a piece of clothing from each of them in order to assemble an outfit, and depending on what that outfit is, you will unlock a mini-game based around that, and that is basically the gameplay loop. You grind out this new mini-game for more money, so you can buy more clothes, and unlock a new mini-game to grind out so you can get more clothes. That's pretty much the game's gameplay loop until you become the top idol, and really, there's not much else beyond that, but I do have a few additional comments to make about the game. The game basically turns into a survival game during the town walking sections, because you got the hunger meter, and you need to head to all these different food stores around the town in order to replenish that. If you want it dropped to 0, you basically die, but you don't, because, you know, it's a kid's game, based on a kid's anime, which is based on a virtual pet infamous for dying, so I don't really get why they're not dying, but they're more of characters than pets in the anime in this game anyway. Never. Also, the illustrations in this game honestly look DeviantArt tier and super sloppy, but I really do love them. They sort of capture the charm of the early anime, I feel. This is where we'll fast forward into Tamagotchi no Narikiri Challenge, which basically just throws Melodici into the mix as a playable character. Does away with the town sections, which I think is kind of sad, because that was kind of a part of the identity of the first one, even if they did kind of suck. And this time you're basically just taking classes and trying to graduate from this place called Challenge Town, I guess? The theming of these games isn't exactly as good as the first one, I feel, you know, with them just being classes, but honestly, these are more fun in execution and well thought out than the previous ones were, which were more simple and super grindy and got really old kind of fast. I do want to give any completionists a heads up, though. If these games interest you, just be warned. If you want to 100% complete this game and get all the outfits like I did, you need McDonald's toys to do that, because they had these codes as part of a promotion, because when the anime was at its peak, Tamagotchi basically owned Japan. For Narikiri Channel, it's not much work, you know, if you can work Google Translate, you're golden, they're all easily documented. But for Narikiri Challenge, it's a lot more difficult. You need to actively seek out these codes on pictures of these toys, because there is no sort of picture or forum with all of them. And I haven't even completed the games because some of the codes are tied to magazines. I'm not buying a bunch of magazines to find these, and I looked so hard for scans or anything, and there's just nothing. If you want to know my opinions on these games, I think they're better novelties than games, honestly. They're decent fun, but honestly, it's more fun just saying, I played Tamagotchi no Narikiri Channel and Narikiri Challenge, and being the only person who can say that in like a couple 1,000-mile radius, probably. It's difficult for me to say which one of these games I prefer, but I think I'm gonna have to give it to Tamagotchi no Narikiri Channel. Challenge does better with the gameplay, but Narikiri Channel just has a lot more personality and charm to it that just makes the game a little more bearable, you know? If these games interest you at all, go ahead, check them out. I'm not gonna stop you, but really, you could do without them. I didn't exactly have any real expectations going into these, and I kind of came out the same way. I was indifferent, I guess I'll say. Our Banger DLC award goes to Cuphead, the Delicious Last Course. Unfortunately, it's a DLC, so I can't just come up on the stage. What were you expecting? With 2022 marking the debut of both the Cuphead show as well as this DLC, you cannot deny that 2022 has been a great year for our favorite
human being, well, almost.
Cuphead the Delicious Last Course adds a ton of new features on top of the already amazing base Cuphead game, and it makes it even better in my eyes. To start off, we get the introduction of the brand new character, Ms. Chalice. Well, I say brand new, but it's really just the legendary Chalice, but, you know, in living form now, not just a ghost. Here's an actual body. And Ms. Chalice is definitely a pretty powerful character and does make the game easier, but it comes at the cost of your charm, because in order to transform into Ms. Chalice, you need to be using this cookie as your charm. It's a fair trade-off. You get tons of cool new abilities and a cool new character to play as, but you can no longer use the smoke dash. While we're on the topic of things like charms and weapons, there are some new weapons that were added, and honestly, they are tons of fun to use. And the charms are definitely alright, they're alright. The cookie definitely stands out though, that's easily the best one they added, no questions asked. The main meat of the DLC, being the bosses, is also just as great as it was in the base game. None of these fall short, even the weakest ones I was having a blast with, and when they're at their peak, they can be some of the best bosses in the entire game. We're like halfway through these awards, and I don't want to be here all day, so I'm just gonna mention the best boss, not just in the DLC, but possibly the entirety of Cuphead, the Moonshine Mob. They are honestly peak Cuphead boss. The concept of bug gangsters is hilarious and well executed as well, and the fight has so much variety because each phase you're going up against a different one of these gangsters, and they have a unique way of taking you on, so you kinda have to mix up your strategy if you want to win, you know? And I'd be remiss to not mention the infamous fake knockout that happens leading into the final fight with the little snail. It got so many people, and it got me especially good, because this was the first boss of the DLC I fought, so I didn't really know what to expect and thought, oh, maybe they're doing unique knockout screens. They weren't. That was fake. I got duped. I died, and after the initial shock, I laughed it off, and I laughed it off good. That was one of the greatest deaths I've ever had in a video game. Let's not forget to also mention the music that plays during this fight because it is legendary. It is a top-tier Cuphead song, probably my favorite one in the entire game. The DLC isn't exactly perfect though from what I remember. I'm not sure if they released a patch that patched this stuff out, but the final fight against Chef Saltbaker was super buggy, and I kinda got this easy S rank by the fight just randomly bugging out on me, and all this crazy stuff was happening, and he was just staying still, and animations were looping, and there was phase transitions, but nothing actually happening. It was just insane. But really, small things like that probably did get patched out because you can feel the love MDHR has for Cuphead, because they delayed the DLC, probably to do things like refine the animations, make sure everything plays smoothly. And yeah, there were some bumps in that, but I'm sure they patched them out. The animations are also top-notch. I probably should have mentioned that before, but it's kind of a no-brainer. It's Cuphead. Of course the animation is going to look fantastic. Cuphead The Delicious Last Course is exactly what every video game DLC should strive to be like. It feels right at home in the game, and every single dollar is worth the experience you get. Even if it's not the longest thing in the world, you are getting more than what you paid for, and it's amazing. Our measurable and measurable disappointment award goes to Mario Pinball Land. Can you see that good? The cartridge is just a little tiny. Mario Pinball Land, Mario Pinball Land, Mario Pinball Land. How I wasted $15 whole on you. Mario Pinball Land is a super obscure Mario game, and whenever it's brought up, it's usually in a negative light by the fandom, and honestly, that is completely justified. I wish I could be one of the thousands of people who have had this game Men in Blacked out of their memory, because I want to forget I even played this disaster. I'll just start this off by saying I'm not exactly the biggest fan of pinball games. Pinball tables I can have a fun time with, but actual pinball games, like Mario Pinball Land, where they put a goal in there beyond just getting a high score, are just kind of frustrating to me, you know? When you're trying to accomplish something, like a serious goal, not just some silly high score shenanigans, then it gets really frustrating when the ball starts getting into bad positions and there's nothing you can do about it. And Mario Pinball Land doesn't really have that as much as other pinball games, but what it does have is some of the most frustrating pinball tables I have ever seen in my life. Their goal here is to defeat Bowser and save Peach, you know, your typical Mario story stuff, but this time Mario and Peach have been crushed into ball form in some of the most hilarious cutscenes to ever be put in a Mario game. In order to defeat Bowser, you need to get the 4 different boss keys from the bosses found in the game, as well as collect a certain amount of power stars in order to open his door. But unfortunately, these power stars and bosses can be quite frustrating. The main problem you'll have on practically every single screen of this game is that it's so difficult to precisely aim the Mario pinball into these tiny doors, which are at the top of the screen, sometimes dead center, which is super frustrating. And then there's the challenges that actually net you these stars, and while some of them, I'll admit, are actually kind of fun, or at least have good ideas behind them, they can get kind of frustrating sometimes. There's these coin stars you unlock later on in the game after you defeat all the bosses, besides Bowser, and they are ridiculous. You are given a time limit that you need to act on and precisely collect 8 coins scattered around the entire table. Mario Pinball Land lives and dies based on its gameplay, and its gameplay is really precise and precision and does not mix with pinball very well. I'm not saying there's no amount of precision in pinball at all, but in pinball you're not regularly trying to hit small targets and go through these small little tunnels and do it in a limited time. You're not trying to do anything like that in vanilla pinball, but in Mario Pinball Land, yes, you are demanded to do this. Well, the coin stars are optional, but you still get what I'm saying. Also, spoilers for a 20-something-year-old Game Boy Advance pinball game, but Bowser is a super frustrating way to end off the game. The fight requires you to go along the edge of the arena and basically spin these cogs to move these thwomps up and then hit a switch, which is like in the middle of the arena, in order to flip Bowser over and stun him. This is just ridiculously frustrating, and you will get flung out of the arena so many times. And it sucks that the final boss has to be so bad when the bosses are some of the only good things about this game, I'll say. Well, they're not all exactly good, but most of them are alright. Mario Pinball Land is a horrible game, gameplay-wise, but I feel like it's got some pretty bells and whistles that honestly elevate the experience just a little bit. The graphical style is beautiful. They're clearly sprites, but they managed to look pseudo 3D amazing, which is some of the best pseudo 3D I've ever seen. And I think the music actually does go kind of hard at points, especially the Cheep Cheep Pufferfish boss theme. Mario Pinball Land is another game I can add to the list of games I kind of bought as a joke, but wound up really disliking, unsurprisingly. I wouldn't recommend actually playing a game if you want to experience much a Let's Play or something. That way you can appreciate the beautiful graphics and music while not torturing yourself with the horrible gameplay. I got Mario Pinball Land on a trip to Denver with my family, so I guess I'll give the game a little bit of sentimental value points, but really that doesn't amount to much. But there's a much better game we'll be talking about a little later on in the video, which I poured a lot more time into, understandably. Our Guilty Pleasure award goes to Mega Man X6. Unfortunately, I played X6 through perfectly legal means, so I don't really have it with me right now, but I did get this for Christmas. It's a Pharaoh Man plush. I know it's not like Mega Man X, I know it's classic, but look, it's Pharaoh Man.
Pharaoh Man!
Mega Man X6 is generally considered to be one of the absolute worst Mega Man games by the fandom, not only in the X series, but just the whole Mega Man franchise in general. So my expectations going into X6 were not very high. But all my expectations aside, I actually came out of X6 kind of loving it. Mega Man X6 has a bit of an interesting history, but to sort of keep it brief, Inafune made Mega Man X5, wanted that to be the conclusion to the X series so we could start working on the Zero series, which would basically just be the continuation, but Capcom was making a lot of money off of Mega Man X, there was still money to be made, and so X6 was quickly churned out in like less than a year. There's been a surprising amount of talk about games that needed some more time in the oven during this video, and X6 is no exception to that. Level design is really sloppy, messy, and frustrating. There's plenty of strange and questionable design choices. Hell, there's even a section near the end of the game that is almost impossible to get through if you are using the incorrect armor. However, I'd be lying if I said it wasn't things like that that made X6 honestly a blast for me to play, especially on subsequent playthroughs where I already knew what bullshit was ahead of me and how to deal with that bullshit. I guess the reason why this works so much for me and gives me a fun time, besides me having a surprisingly high tolerance for this kind of stuff, which I had no idea I had, this game controls great, honestly. I just finished X4 before playing X6, and something about X6's controls just felt more right and natural than X4, and X4 controls great, so it's not often I find myself going like, whoa, this is awesome to some controls in a video game, but something about X6 just really made me go like that during the intro stage. The control in the game is immaculate, and unless things like these annoying icy slopes are being thrown in your way, you're basically always in perfect control, and all deaths are not always going to be your fault, of course, but it really does make it feel manageable to overcome these obstacles that are thrown at you, along with the fact that the game actually has no live system. I feel like with games like Mega Man, lives are sort of an integral part of the experience. Players need to learn from their mistakes, and if they're playing poorly, they sorta have to be punished in order to become better players. However, despite what I just said, I feel like X6 is sort of an outlier to this because it's less about the player learning from their mistakes and more about learning about the designer's mistakes and overcoming those. So doing away with lives, as well as having the player always restart from their last checkpoint, sort of makes the game a lot more bearable and playable. It lets players practice these punishingly difficult levels at their own leisure without much of a punishment in a traditional sense. The levels are sort of a punishment because they are ridiculously difficult at times, and having this sort of makes what seems like an impossible task possible, you know? It doesn't require nearly as much practice as it would if it was like a traditional Mega Man game, and it makes the whole experience just a lot better. And it would be a mistake to not mention the amazing soundtrack this game has. Even people who don't like this game cannot deny the excellence of its OST. I know it's sort of expected for a Mega Man game, but X6 takes it to the next level and is honestly one of the best OSTs, not just in the X series, but in the entire franchise as a whole. Tracks like both of the opening themes, the credits theme, the gate stage theme, Infinity Maginion's theme, and the absolute perfection that is Blaze Enix's theme really do cement the entire franchise. Of course, not everything sits right with me in X. To no one's surprise, our Game of the Year of 2022 award goes to Kirby and the Forgotten Land. What? The Kirby guy's favorite game of 2022 is the big Kirby release? Oh, that's nuts! I can't believe it! That's crazy! Yes, make no mistake, Kirby and the Forgotten Land is indeed my 2022 Game of the Year, and it honestly earned it. Forgotten Land is an amazing game, and I feel like my original video on it didn't exactly do it justice, so hopefully I could sort of make that up in a few minutes. Alright, let's get into it. Despite the Kirby series experimenting with 3D as far back as Kirby Air Ride, Forgotten Land is the first mainline 3D Kirby title, and given all of those aforementioned 3D experiments, it's no surprise Forgotten Land was an amazing first foray into 3D for mainline Kirby. Forgotten Land is yet another game that truly wowed me with its controls as early as the demo. When I felt them, they just felt so right, and they did an amazing job translating the main modern 2D Kirby moveset into 3D. It just felt so good. Copy abilities, of course, return, and they feel amazing. Looks like Kirby Battle Royale really did do something for the greater Kirby franchise by testing the waters for 3D copy abilities, because these feel wonderful. Most of the classic abilities translate really well to 3D, and they're a blast to use. Most of them, anyway. We even get two new abilities in the form of Ranger and Drill, with Ranger being easily the best ability in the game, and no questions asked, and it is so fun to play around with and just a blast to use in every scenario. And Drill makes traversing the world super fun by digging underground, even if it's worthless during boss fights. Each ability also receives at least one upgrade, which prevents the game from ever getting stale, as you can unlock these throughout the duration of the game. And while I feel like it doesn't exactly compensate for the kind of small and limited movesets and the pretty low amount of copy abilities, especially with the amount of duds in there, hopefully we could see this improved in the next game, but Forgotten Land definitely did a solid job, I'll say. There's also the game's main gimmick, which is Mouthful Mode, which is definitely a very fun and well-executed gimmick. Kirby can basically cram objects down his gullet and basically becomes a Kirby version of that object, gaining the object's power. Some of these are a little on the useless side, but others are super fun to play around with and are well incorporated into the level design. Speaking of the level design, it's just immaculate in general. I don't think there's a single bad level in this entire game. Each one has a perfect blend of things like combat, platforming, puzzles, exploration, it's all there. And they each have this really amazing atmosphere to them, you know? They got these tired old tropes, but sort of gave them a post-apocalyptic edge that really sets them apart from anything we've seen in the Kirby franchise and most things out there, actually. The bosses are also really good as well. I do feel like they are a little patternized, which can make them get a little stale after a while, but really, the bosses are still tons of fun, and when they are good, they are really damn good. Some of the best in the franchise, I'd actually say. I was a little worried about cheesing these with the hover by just flying over them and waiting for an opportunity to attack, but the hover got a big nerf in Forgotten Land, which was honestly for the better. It really would suck if you could just fly over most of this amazingly designed game. There's also Waddle Dee Town, which basically acts as the game's main hub, and it's just a pretty fun place to chill out in. There's a bunch of fun activities in there. I do think maybe there could have been a few more things you unlock later on. It just kind of feels like the unlockables dip off at a certain point and you don't really get much, but still, it's a wonderful place to just hang around in and have a good time. And it gives you a nice, comfy place with a little bit of familiarity compared to the rest of the Forgotten Land, which is unlike anything we've ever seen before, and a far cry from the super fan service heavy Star Allies. Honestly, I feel like this is sort of a refreshing approach after Star Allies, even if I do think there probably should have been a few more references. Star Allies was super heavy on the references, and that was wonderful, but sometimes you just need a little break, and Forgotten Land really does give you a Kirby experience unlike anything you've ever seen before, and it is wonderful. And I don't want to get too spoiler heavy, especially with these more recent games we'll be talking about, but really, Forgotten Land, the finale is just absolutely insane. I was in complete shock the whole time, and hopefully you will too. It is something to experience and one of the best in the whole franchise, honestly. In the end, Kirby and the Forgotten Land is an amazing game. I'd say it's one of the greatest Kirby games, even if it's not exactly the peak of the franchise. Hell, as a matter of fact, I'd say it's probably like a top 10 games ever for me, at least. It's an experience. It's not just a game. It is an experience. Sure, it does have a few shortcomings, but it's still a fantastic first 3D Kirby game, and just a fantastic Kirby game in general. Given that HAL will definitely be making some more 3D Kirby games in the future, hopefully we can see Forgotten Land's issues be ironed out in subsequent titles, and maybe have a game that is better than Forgotten Land. I'm not going to say they're about to make peak Kirby because, you know, nostalgic feelings are a really hard thing to overcome. But really, Forgotten Land is one of the main reasons why the future of Kirby is just looking so bright, and it makes me happy to see my little pink man going somewhere good. Well, none of that should really be a major surprise to you. I already made a whole video on the game, and as you all probably know, I'm sort of a Kirby connoisseur myself, but something that might be surprising is that Forgotten Land might be my favorite game that released this year, but not actually my favorite game I played this year. Yes, you heard that correctly. Roll the award transition thing. Our Peak Fiction Award goes to Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Explorers of Sky. Woo! Yeah! Woo! Yeah! Let's go! Oh, can you guys see that the cartridge is like really small? No, your ears are not deceiving you. I actually found a game this year that I played that is better than Kirby and the Forgotten Land, which I honestly find to be really impressive because Forgotten Land is such a damn good game. Explorers of Sky is the other game I got on my little trip to Denver, where I also picked up Mario Pinball Land, and unsurprisingly, I played this one way more because not only is Mario Pinball Land a steaming dumpster fire, but Explorers of Sky is simply one of the greatest games I have ever played. Honestly, even finding the game felt like a crazy sort of scenario set up by fate. I've been meaning to get into Mystery Dungeon for a little while at that point, and on that trip to Denver, I sort of realized maybe I should try seeing if I could find Explorers of Sky anywhere, because, you know, that's basically considered the best one by literally everyone, so basically meeting that cartridge face to face was an experience, almost like it was meant to be. I was meant to play this game. And yes, it came out to a lot of money, like most old Pokemon games are, but really, this was like the best $80 to $100, I forgot the actual price, that I have ever spent on a game, and honestly, it was worth every single dollar I shelled out for this, and I couldn't imagine how much of a bargain it was to get this game at retail price. I also picked up Mario Kart DS on that trip because, you know, I previously had the game, but it was rentals, so I mean, I kind of put off Explorers of Sky for a little bit because I honestly wanted to relive some memories with Mario Kart DS, finally being able to own the game myself, and I didn't bring my GBA, thank God. I was secretly sparing myself from the torture that would await me back home, but when I popped in that Explorers of Sky cartridge, I was ready for an experience, and it was an experience I got indeed. There's a lot of complexity and depth to Explorers of Sky's gameplay that I don't really want to get into here, but basically, to give you the rundown, it's a randomly generated dungeon crawler where you wander around floors of randomly generated dungeons and you pick up treasure and defeat wild Pokemon in order to progress. The game basically has an endless level of replayability due to the fact that dungeons are ever-changing despite their fixed amount of floors, so basically, you could run through the same dungeon and you'll practically never be running through the same exact dungeon twice. And these dungeons, despite being randomly generated, are actually tons of fun to go through. Of course, there's going to be plenty of annoyances like attacks from wild Pokemon that fill up the entire screen. Earthquake is especially annoying in this regard, but really, there's all sorts of memorable things that can happen while you're out here. Doing something like coming back out of a dungeon with a huge treasure haul or overcoming a monster house you accidentally walked into are some of the most satisfying things you can do in this game, and they're always something for the memory books. Before we get into the absolute best thing about this game and the thing that really makes it such an experience, I just want to talk about how amazing this game looks and sounds. The visuals in this game are just absolutely beautiful. The environments look so amazing and vibrant, and the Pokemon look great, especially the little portraits they have when talking. I mean, I have this game to thank for all of these wonderful Lopunny portraits. Every single one of these is just so wonderful. Hell, Lopunny even plays a major role in this game in a side story, so it gives me the perfect excuse to slap Lopunny on the thumbnail, so I have this game to thank for letting me show off the greatest Pokemon ever created some more. And the soundtrack is just amazing. I'm not gonna say I would listen to every single one of these tracks in my free time or anything like that, but they are really atmospheric tracks, even if they don't really sound like it, and they manage to perfectly sell you an atmosphere that a dungeon or an event or anything is going for. Whether a track is trying to be relaxing or mysterious or climactic or just trying to tie into how a certain character is feeling or what's going on with the story, it's always done brilliantly, and it just feels so natural to the game. And everything I just mentioned is all amazing in its own right, and it makes the game such a fun experience and a wonderful experience, but the thing that really sells it to me especially is the amazing story. It is not only undoubtedly the best Pokemon story, no questions asked, but it is like the greatest video game story ever told, up there with the likes of Mother 3 in my opinion. Despite what one would probably believe during the early stages of the game, the story is a lot less about your Pokemon self-insert and more about your partner character and how they grow and develop over the course of the game. Of course, that's not to say you aren't an important part of the story at all, but you basically act as sort of a mentor character towards the partner. You give them the courage and the strength to become stronger. And around the middle of the game, you basically taught the partner character so much that they basically save all of the heroes from a certain demise, and it seems like the development would logically just sort of stop there, you know, the strength has already been found, but then the partner sort of has to face something that simply can't be avoided. I'm keeping this intentionally vague because I don't want to, you know, spoil the game if you haven't played it. You seriously need to go play this game if you haven't, man. And in the end, it all just concludes with one of the most emotionally powerful scenes I've ever seen in any piece of media ever, and it did have me in tears, I'm not gonna lie here. Seeing the one you have basically spent the entire journey with in such a sad and emotionally distressed state really hits hard, you know? And it wraps up in a way I feel like I would normally not really like that much, and most people would not really like that much, to be fair, but to me, it's just beautiful, and it ends the game off in such a phenomenal way, and it really cemented itself as one of the greatest pieces of fiction to ever exist, honestly. But really, the game isn't over then. There's also a post-game story, which is admittedly lacking, especially compared to the previous story, but when things do get good, you do get some really good moments from that, and there are plenty of dungeons you can find and explore later on in the game, and they can actually be quite challenging as well, and of course you could also try to recruit all the Pokemon if you're completely insane. I honestly do want to do that someday, you know? I'm kind of a masochist myself. And I kind of want to end this off with something you've probably never heard before, but am I like the only person who actually got emotionally attached to my recruits? You know, like the random wild Pokemon you can recruit in the game and use whenever dungeons allow you to actually do it. Maybe it's because I basically used the same 2 recruits throughout the whole game, or maybe it's because by their final stage there were a Ludicolo and Lopunny, aka the 2 greatest Pokemon ever created, but damn, it's impressive how much the game actually got me to love what are basically just simple recruits. Of course, the game does still have a few flaws. At the end of the day, no game truly is perfect. Like, I already brought up how some unfortunate things can happen in dungeons, like Earthquake basically wiping your entire team, or the rough edges of the post-game story. Another small nitpick I have is a pretty unique one. No one has ever said this before, I'm sure, but why can't I bring my recruits in most of the ending dungeons in the story and post-game story? Like, these recruits are my friends. Like, sometimes I get why I can't bring them in, but I still want to bring them in anyway, you know? It's always more fun traveling around with the greatest Pokemon ever, especially Lopunny. Like, you can't just kick Lopunny out of a dungeon, man. That's not cool. But really, all flaws aside, Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Explorers the Sky is a game unlike anything I've ever played before, and it absolutely blew me away, even with my already pretty high expectations. As someone who rarely ever cries at any sort of media, I consider it to be impressive that the game actually managed to bring me to that sort of emotional state, because like, the only other game I can actually say did that for me is Mother 3, and even then I kind of already knew what was going to happen, so it didn't hit me as hard as it would have Blind. The fact that the game actually managed to do that to me feels like a real testament to the game's quality and how amazingly it tells its story, and how, not just the story, but everything else in the game just seems to be so on point, so refined, so almost perfect. It's so impressive something like this can just even exist, because it's just amazing. It's just, I'm out of words. I've said amazing like a million times in this video. When you've played as many games as I have, it can be difficult to decide what your favorite game is, and for me, it will always be Kirby's Dream Collection Special Edition. 6 Kirby games, loads of additional content, even 3 anime episodes, even if one of them is kind of not it at all. But really, the game is amazing, even if its lesser moments come from the fact that some legacy content wasn't as high quality as majority of it, like the vast majority, but still it's the greatest game ever made, no questions asked. But I mean, if you ban collections, then I can't just cop out, and then it becomes a challenge. But Explorers of Sky is definitely up for the consideration of that #1 spot. Yes, that's it for the awards, but don't pack up just yet. I have a final piece to say here before we leave. This year was definitely a year, and it definitely happened. It's kind of difficult to say where I stand on this year personally. A lot of stuff happened, some of it not good, like, I mean, I got sick like 5 times. I'm sick right now, I don't know if you can hear that, but I did get sick a lot. I was like an illness magnet, it was ridiculous. And school was getting super taxing, like, honestly, I can't take it anymore, but tons of wonderful things did happen this year, besides the obvious. I got to spend time with my family, and it was wonderful. As you heard in the video, I got to play tons of great games this year, even if I did play some that weren't very good. It was a big year for my main man, Kirby, so that was obviously a very great thing for me. I got to meet tons of amazing people and made some new friends, and I feel like I'm now a part of the greater Kirby community, which, honestly, thank you to everyone who made this possible from the bottom of my heart. I cannot believe I actually made it this far in like a little over a year. It was just a silly little iceberg video that kind of aged like milk a little bit. Like, the audio quality is really bad on that one, but it did so much for me, and I'm thankful that I actually managed to get this far. It's such an honor to be a member of this community. It's such a wonderful place. But that's enough of the sappy stuff and enough of the babbling from me this year on my YouTube channel, at least. I got tons of projects planned for next year, and hopefully I'll be able to churn those out in a timely manner. I think I probably have what it takes now to make YouTube videos regularly, I hope. Got kind of that motivation, you know? My motivation's on and off. But if you like this video, leave a like. If you didn't, leave a dislike. And if you enjoyed this, maybe consider subscribing to the channel and checking out my Twitter. I got the link in the description. Maybe if I play enough games in 2023 and can come up with enough awards, we might do this Game Awards thing again. I can't really make any promises, but who knows? Maybe this could become a channel tradition. I hope it can. But anyways, Happy New Year, and Pekachow out!